So it's starting to happen. The transfers are starting to drop as we get closer to the start of the season. Of course, August the 8th is when it all ends. An earlier transfer deadline this year with the Euro 2020 next year. So we thought we'd just take a second. Well, actually, the reason why this whole video has happened is because me and Kristan Heneage, who joins me right now, we were WhatsApping and chatting. And from that, we were talking about what have been the good transfers. And then we thought, let's make a video out of it. So Kristan joins me right now. How are you, mate?
I'm not bad, thanks, mate. How are you?
I'm very good, mate. So we're going to run through a few different transfers that Kristan thinks could be the sort of buy of the summer, so far at least, and then we'll get Kristan to make his mind up at the end. But of course, we're going to want to know what you guys think as well in the comments below. Before we get into that, this video today is sponsored by the guys at OneFootball. The OneFootball app is a cracking app that's got all the transfer news very, very quickly. And when the season starts, it'll have everything you need as well in terms of the news for your club. You can make it very specific to your club as well, but also little bits of fun and little bits of transfer gossip and tweets and little memes and videos and everything you could think of, everything that we all love about football. So what are you waiting for? Go and check it out. The link is in the description. Go download the OneFootball app right this second. Right, Kristan, let's do it. So we're going to kick off with a name that a lot of people won't have known of before a couple of weeks ago. But this is one of the names that came out from our... I'm revealing everything here in terms of the exclusive WhatsApp text we sent to each other. Harvey Elliott. Harvey Elliott has left Fulham. He's a young player, 16 years old, and he's gone to Liverpool. He's an English player, and Real Madrid and Paris Saint-Germain apparently were one of quite a few clubs that were all after this guy. And this is quite an interesting one to kick off with. For someone so young, he became the youngest ever player in the Premier League in May when Fulham played Wolves. But he's an exciting talent, and so much so that Liverpool have gone and bought him for what seems to be a bit of an undisclosed fee, which it normally is, and there's normally loads of add-ons, isn't there? So talk to me about Harvey Elliott. Why should Liverpool fans be excited by him?
I think you just have to look at how early he was introduced by Fulham into the first team, really. He was kind of dipped in towards the back end of last season. He played a little bit against Newcastle on the final day of the season. He's very technically proficient. Personally, what I kind of admire from what I've seen of him is just how composed he is. He dropped into Premier League football at the end of the season there and didn't seem flustered by it at all, was incredibly calm on the ball, stepped up to the occasion quite comfortably. And I think if I'm Liverpool, the first team is fantastic. It's doing wonderful things. It's a Champions League winning first team at this point. But you always want to be looking forward to the future. And you've got Ryan Brewster, you've got Jones in there as well at the under-23s. So this is just another bit of stardust to kind of throw on top of that, really. Yeah,
and as a player, so we've seen him in the bits I've seen of him was mainly for the England under-17s. And it sounds like he's a player that's... And there's a few of these that we're going to be talking about, actually. He's that player who can play out wide, but likes to kind of cut in as well. Not the tallest. Often when a player's sort of young, they'll be one or the other. Either they'll be just so technically brilliant, or they'll be very big for their side, and so they can deal with the demands of the Premier League. He's the former, isn't he? He's a creative player that can play along that front line.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something we're seeing more and more now is players that can float across the positions. I think just in general, we're breeding a much more flexible, versatile type of footballer because of that. And so, he's someone that will switch between those positions quite comfortably. And like I say, for me, it'll be interesting to see how kind of Liverpool manage him and also those names we talked about before in Ryan Brewster and Curtis Jones, because they are, as young as Harvey Elliott is, coming into some important times in their young careers. So are they sent out on loan? Are they trusted to be kept inside the sort of Liverpool infrastructure and incubated that way? It's going to be an interesting time if I'm a Liverpool fan, personally.
I think with these guys as well, especially the attacking players that want to come through, that feels like it's a little bit harder. I think someone like Trent Alexander-Arnold, although he's obviously become integral to Liverpool, in that right back position, I think that often it feels a bit safer for a manager to chuck a player in that position. When it comes to those attacking positions, Brewster, like saying here with Harvey Elliott, that's going to be the interesting thing in terms of the second sort of stage of Klopp's sort of tenure at Liverpool. Is he willing to do that in those areas of the pitch, especially when the sort of room for error, if they want to win a Premier League, is so finite? So I think with him, this is one where it's not going to be he's not going to be playing for them next season, is he? Or maybe even the season after that. It's a long-term thing. But why do you think he might be the best summer signing so far. What would be your sentence on him as we move on to the next one?
It's potential, and we can always get excited about potential.
Absolutely. Good one. Fornals at West Ham, 24 million. We've got a West Ham fan who's actually just behind this camera, who's very excited about this guy. Do you want to shout out, Will? Are you very excited?
Yeah.
That's not really what I was after, Will, but
Wow.
that's fine. Yeah, you can see. You
Was
can
nearly
tell,
blown away there, man.
Exactly. Whoa. So Villarreal's midfielder, he's just won the under 21 tournament with Spain. Talk to us about him. This was the one that you were very, very excited about, the fact that not just that they've got him in, but almost that they've got Arnautovic out as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's my sentence on this one is you get him for, I think, 24. You ship out Arnautovic for 25, who's considerably older, a bit of a troublemaker if we're very honest about it. That is very good business, and very good business by a club in West Ham that I think at least pre-Pellegrini, we could say we're not great in the transfer market. We're quite wasteful, actually. I think of deals like Matt Jarvis. I think of Andy Carroll. Those big money risks that felt like statement signings, but only if, the statement was we have money to spend and we don't really know how to use it. And I think that's the thing with Fornals. If you watch that Spanish under-21 side, they were just stacked with talent. Dani Olmo, who is in Dinamo Zagreb, Ceballos, who's just sitting at Real Madrid, not really doing anything, and I really want that to change. This was a fantastic attacking side, and I look at the situation he will now walk into, where he has someone like Felipe Anderson alongside him, Yarmolenko, who's potentially going to come back from injury now and add something. This is a deep West Ham side. I think we look at who could break that sort of top six ironclad set of teams. We talk about Leicester, understandably, because they've got tremendous depth. Yeah. But West Ham are someone I wouldn't sleep on, because I think they've looked at the team and thought, right, where do we actually need to improve? Where maybe did we run out of gas last season?
Yeah, and I think there's it shows the clout of Pellegrini a little bit, that you can kind of get this exciting young player. Obviously, he played in the under-21, so he's actually 23, so he's a little bit older. And also, I think in terms of, like you say, being wasteful, and that is the thing with West Ham. There are clubs that you go, oh, okay, he's not good enough for that club. Oh, do you know he'd be good? He'd be good at a West Ham. The amount of times they've bought players like that instead of getting that guy who's potential, but also is starting to deliver as well. The one thing I would say about him, looking into his sort of stats and things like that, is I guess he was in a struggling side last season, wasn't he?
Yeah, but I think at the same time, you put him alongside the quality of the national team at the under-21 level this summer, and you saw good players are good players. I think I see what people might read into that if sort of that Craig Gardner complex, if you will, when he was at Birmingham and got like 10 goals in one season. And people thought, oh, he's a great midfielder in a struggling side. But it was really the fact that everything ran through him. So, of course, he was going to look good, but it wasn't good enough to keep them up. So I think, amazing transition, by the way, Fornals to Craig Gardner. Not many will make that.
And I'm desperate to just say Junior Hoylett at you as well. It's exactly the same thing.
Yeah, we've all got examples of those players who do really well in a side that struggles, and we think, oh, they'll be perfect when they get a move. But it doesn't always work like that. I think with him, this is a different story, because we've seen that quality elsewhere. We've seen it manifest when he's surrounded by good players. Yeah.
So again, similar kind of player. That he can play. From what I've seen, it seems like he's a little bit more of a midfielder than that. That sort of frontline forward. Not too many goals last season. I've got it here. Hang on. It's 2 goals and 3 assists. So not much in that side of it. But the fact that you see him then go and do bits for Spain, it shows that the scouting from West Ham is a lot smarter. The one thing, and final thing I would say that on the West Ham is, Declan Rice becomes even more important when you start to have Sami Nasri, Felipe Anderson, and a guy like Fornals, because they're going to need a bit of physicality as well. They're obviously going to play a lot of possession-based football. Yeah,
absolutely, and he'll be the linchpin that holds that midfield together. And to be fair to him, I think he did that job fantastically last season, just screening the centre-backs, just mopping up the second balls, keeping the possession simple. That actually is one of the harder things to do, I think, when you're a number 6 or a defensive midfielder, is to just keep playing simple, make the smart decisions all the time. And I think that's part of what we said before there, with they've actually started to look, I think, from quite a macro perspective and think, how does this relate to everyone that's around them? And I think, yeah, there's still some fat they'll need to trim on that wage bill. I think Jordan Hugill will have to find a home because I can't see him finding a regular spot in the Premier League. The situation with Javier Hernandez seems a bit up and down to me. He clearly works in the Premier League, but I don't think he's going to stay at West Ham. And the links to MLS just aren't really as concrete as you'd want them to be. So there's still some work to do, but honestly, this is a really smart piece of business, I think, by West Ham.
Okay, let's move on to, we're talking about Declan Rice there. I think there's been a few times where he's been linked with Man City and possibly taking that, being the next guy after Fernandinho. I mean, the very gentle, slight cracks that you had in Man City's Premier League season last season was when Fernandinho wasn't in the team. And they've looked to kind of get that sorted out. And they've missed out on a few players in the past, but they've now got Rodri, 63 million pounds from Atletico Madrid. And this is a player that, when you look at the sort of the scout reports, he really has got absolutely everything. And you now think that to have two players of the quality of Rodri and Fernandinho in the same squad, Man City have they've just plugged a hole. It's not plugging a hole, but they've just added to put what is possibly the only weakness that you can really see at Man City with Rodri, right?
Yeah, so let's deal with the criticisms that Man City often get first, which is, yes, they spend a decent amount of money. No denying that. I won't try and argue any. But what I really like about Man City is if you look when they break the bank, they do it in a really considered way. If you watched All or Nothing, they moved the Emerick Laporte deal up a couple months because they realised that was what we needed to do then and there. And the control they've got over that situation, it did manifest itself again with this situation because they wanted Jorginho. They thought they'd got him. They had what they felt was an agreement. And then he opted to go to Chelsea with Sarri. Now, instead of kind of scrabbling around and going, right, we need a defensive midfielder, let's just get someone, and panic buying, essentially, they held off. And look, there's inherent risk in that. We saw, as you alluded to there, last season when they struggled, it was because Fernandinho either wasn't fit or wasn't playing or what have you. They've waited, I think, a summer, and they've got to now, and they've bought Rodri. And I think they've been rewarded for that because they've got a player that fits perfectly. I've seen comparisons to Busquets. I think he's a more robust version, personally. I think he's a lot more physically imposing than Busquets is. I think maybe there's a little slope in terms of the sort of class and intelligence that Busquets has, but it's minute. I'm not talking huge drops here. But in return, you've got someone that I think will handle the Premier League really well. And again, when you look at those kind of squad breakdowns, I'm sure we all used to do them as kids in school. You write down who's your first 11, who's your second 11, that kind of thing. They've just got strength and depth everywhere. It's the same with the Angelino deal. It's just another smart piece of business by Man City.
Quite an interesting story with him as well. The fact that he's let go by Atletico Madrid for being too small. Then all of a sudden he turns out to be 6'3", which is pretty useful. But then the sort of road back to it, I think in Villarreal, this is something you sometimes miss with certain players if they're just at the big club straight away. They don't get that development. For him to be able to do it at Villarreal, then move on to Atletico Madrid and had a great season, made the most tackles by any player in the league, 103, won the ball back 280 times, which is the second highest in the division. And I think that's the thing, the fact that he's sort of 6'3", but has high energy and wins the ball as well. I think sometimes those players can almost feel a little bit lethargic with how high-paced football is these days. But it sounds like he's got both to his game. The one thing I was going to ask, you did touch on it a little bit there, is who does start? Fernandinho's 34, but he's better than ever. Do you think that the big thing for me with Fernandinho is his reading of the game and his football intelligence from a defensive point of view? Because when you play in that position, you need to kind of understand the picture and the flow of the game. With the Premier League being as fast-paced as it is, do you think Rodri will be able to get that shirt, that number 6 shirt, off Fernandinho? Or do you think it's still Fernandinho's for another year?
I think it can start as Fernandinho's. I think, look, this is something that, to draw a comparison, Jurgen Klopp's done really well with people like Andrew Robertson. You transition these players into your system slowly. You don't have to just throw them straight in. I'm sure certain clubs feel kind of obligated to do that when they make a marquee signing. But City have the quality, they have the depth to do it. And equally, they've got a lot of competitions to fight on next season. They've got a lot of fronts with the Champions League, with domestic cups. It means that really what you have to do then is try and manage the situations and almost break the games up. I think yeah, you want continuity for a player in a position as key as that as much as possible. But I think Guardiola will manage it and dish it out fine and integrate Rodri fairly slowly because there is no drastic rush to do so.
Yeah, and you can still, you could be second choice and still get 30 games, can't you, this season? There's so many games that they're going to be playing. Yeah, great point. Is Rodri a better signing, though, than Ndombele at Spurs? 60 million euros plus add-ons from Lyon. He's a massive, massive player for them this season, but ultimately unproven in the Premier League. Should there be any concerns over this guy? Is there any way that this one could flop, or is he guaranteed to be a key part of the Spurs team for the next 5-6 years?
I always feel bad because Spurs fans have been through a lot, so I don't want to make them feel bad. This is a wonderful signing. He is a fantastic footballer. He drives through the lines. He supports the team. Defensively, he's very good. The only concern I've seen, which actually I think is quite an astute point, is if you look how dynamic he is with his movements and the ball, how will his knees hold up long term with that? Is there going to come a point where so much sharp movement is going to have any... Fingers crossed, for the sake of the lad, if nothing else, that won't happen anytime soon.
Has he had
ideally, it won't happen
before?
ever. Not that I can think of. No, nothing that springs to mind. But it's just that idea of looking down the road. How will that hold up? Everyone's body is different.
Yeah.
But I think to focus on the here and now, no, this is a fantastic signing for Spurs because it's a replacement for Ndombele first and foremost, which is someone who has really great ball security, is great at progressing through the lines, actually is quite a decent passer, can be creative now and again when he needs to be, but also has really good decision making in terms of when am I going to go up and support, when am I going to hold back and just manage the fort a bit for those attackers in front of me. Those are kind of things that will be a fantastic foundation for him moving to Spurs, and just as they try and move through the gears now and keep that momentum up that was built for them last season.
Do you think that he will have much freedom, or do you think he will be quite a disciplined player for them? Because in Ndombele, he did sort of float about, but he really was that sort of that metronome for them. He's such a safe player to have the ball, like you say, in terms of that ball security. If he's taking up that role, but what I've seen is that he doesn't score a huge amount of goals, and he's a bit, but at the same time he has a bit more sort of drive and power than Ndombele. What kind of role do you think he will play in that Spurs team? Would the focus be more on the defensive side or on the attacking side?
Well, that's the interesting thing because Pochettino has been willing to experiment with systems with the diamond and ways to try and get the most out of Moussa Sissoko. I almost think if I'm Pochettino, I want to bring everything I saw from Lyon across. So I want to bring essentially someone who will play as a double pivot but will be more than comfortable going forward when I need him to. So I wouldn't want to say a sort of dedicated number 6. I think he can play that if you want him to. But I just think when he's got that ability to break the lines, which is something that not every player has, I think that's something I would want to harness and I would want to bring because I'm not terribly sure if actually much of that Spurs squad, in central midfield at least, has that outside of maybe Sissoko.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think what I'm intrigued to see is who plays with him. They've just given Harry Winks a 5-year deal. Sissoko was frightening last season. Is Eriksen still going to be there? But in particular, Sissoko and Winks, I'm intrigued to see who gets the nod. But I guess it might be dependent on the games that they play. Last one then, it's that guy, Odegaard, who obviously burst on the scene as a 15-year-old. We've then since been waiting for him to arrive. Or is he going to be that Freddie Adu? Like, you don't know what he's going to be. That's the kind of pressure that comes with being that player right off the bat who goes, from some random Norwegian team all the way to Madrid. He's only played 2 games for Real Madrid, but you think that he's starting to make the right steps in his career. Obviously, last season he was at Vitesse Arnhem, but he hasn't done it at Real Madrid yet. But this move to Real Sociedad, the season-long loan, you think that could be a great one for everyone involved?
Yeah, definitely. He's got his own song. I mean, he can't be, he's got his own pop
that
song.
That doesn't mean you're good, Kristan. Trust me. Keep you up late.
But it means he could be good, though. It means he could be good.
It means we want him to be good.
That's what we have to invest. Yeah, exactly. And look, when he joined Real Madrid, it was difficult. It was a really polarising situation because everything I had heard from speaking to people close to him, to teammates, was, he's really mature, he's got his head screwed on, his family are the same. And so I thought, right, he'll go to Ajax. In fact, I spoke to a mental coach who said, I'm surprised he didn't go to Ajax. That would have been a much more progressional sort of path for him to follow. He goes to Real Madrid. His time with Castilla is awkward because he does produce assists. He plays fairly well. But there are a lot of reports that say, he's a bit of an outsider. He doesn't really want to train with the reserves. He wants to be in the first team with Benzema and James Rodriguez and all the stars. Goes to Heerenveen, is okay. Has that kind of situation disrupted by a foot injury. And then I think it's Vitesse that just kicks everything forward because he does show himself as this really talented wide playmaker who sits on the right but wants to come in on his left. I've seen comparisons to Ozil in terms of just style, if not quality of passing, because Ozil's passing is his biggest asset. And I do see that. And at the same time, there are people who've said Messi. And
I think
you have to be really careful.
I know what you mean. The way he runs, though, the way he runs and dribbles, sometimes you do get that Messi vibe. But there's so many connotations that come with that. It becomes very dangerous.
Exactly. It becomes such dangerous territory. And I wrote about Odegaard for Oddschecker this week about just the fact that you look at the analytics on this, his chance creation numbers, his key passes per game. Only Hakim Ziyech had more on average last season, according to who scored. So it's things like that where you look at it and you think, well, he's clearly producing, so now he needs to step up. Even his coach, Leonard Slutsky, said he needs to go to another team, another level. Like this is this is where he's at now. And so I think in Sociedad, it's a 2-year loan. There's an option to break it after the first year if it doesn't go well. It's a team that seems, I think, fairly founded on giving young talent an opportunity. He'll have some competition with Januzaj if we assume he's going to play on the right again. And he's also got Isak, the young Swedish striker who's joined them as well, who again has kind of had that similar, he's going to be amazing right now and no patience given to him. So there's similarities for those two there. I just think it's a great next step for him. I don't know his ceiling in terms of will he ever be ready for Real Madrid. That's way too early to say. But I think those who wrote him off and kind of castigated him, he said himself when he was called up to the national team as a teenager, I'm not going to be at my best till I'm 25, 26. So I feel comfortable giving him that, that opportunity to show himself at 25, 26, and then we'll judge him then.
Yeah, well, because looking into it, 11 goals, 12 assists last season, which is great. But the thing when I was reading the analysis of him, which I thought was interesting, was that everyone knows about Vitesse and the players that they bring in from Chelsea off, and that was the big thing for him going into the team last season, was that he had to step into the shoes of Mason Mount. And as soon as I read that name, I thought, look, that's actually the realistic level that we should be looking at him. The problem you've got with this guy is there's this wonder kid who's 15 and Real Madrid go and buy him. And it does, like you say, if he'd gone to Ajax, there would have been a sort of slower progression in terms of people's expectations. But the truth is that Mason Mount might be a wonderful, wonderful player for Chelsea and England for the next 10 years. And Odegaard, there could be a similar thing there because they've both achieved at that level. But that's the sort of level we need to be looking at him at right now. So for him, the next move, being a team that finished 9th last season in Real Sociedad, that is the next step, isn't it? Because you've got to go from Eredivisie to La Liga, and you're going to be playing against tougher opposition. So it does. Often I think people can go, oh, does that mean he's a failure yet? Everyone's waiting to make that call, but actually it's going to take time, right?
Yeah, narrative is a dangerous thing in sports, and I think what didn't help him at the time is that if you've read Carlo Ancelotti's book, he was quite scathing about the transfer itself. He said it was a PR exercise by Florentino. He was like, I think he said something along the lines of, I don't really care if he's a good player. He's not the one I asked for. So things like that, they build up and they start to form what I said is narrative of he's a failure, he's a flop, when actually he's just progressing at his own rate. And I think he's doing absolutely fine. I think last season you saw a player who, again, was actually quite good pressing as well. I know that's not something we necessarily associate with an attacking midfielder, but there were a lot of instances of that. So I think for him, next season is just about keep enjoying your football. Like that's the main thing. That's what Rodri told the young City players when he went on his tour that impressed them so much. Just enjoy football, and I think that's what Odegaard's doing at the minute.
Okay, right, decision time then. We've chatted through a good few there. Which one? So I'll just run through them for you. So you've got Harvey Elliott to Liverpool, Rodri to Man City, Fornals to West Ham, Ndombele to Spurs or Odegaard to Real Sociedad. Which one has been the best transfer of the summer so far, Kristan? What do you think?
I'm most excited to watch Odegaard, but I think Ndombele will have the biggest impact.
I was going to go with Ndombele in terms of impact as well. I think the one that will sort of coup over the most will actually be Rodri, but that's just because of all the players around him. But yeah, I think it's too early to say on Harvey, Elliott. We'll see. Ex-QPR though, so Raheem Sterling was.
Rodri's in the category of who am I going to be up at 11:30 watching highlight compilations of to try and learn something.
Yeah, exactly. Right, so that's what we think. What do you guys think? Let us know in the comments below. Is there someone that we've missed out in terms of the transfers so far? Again, let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, then hit the like button and subscribe to Ball Street. And make sure you check out Kristan Heneage. What was that new article? Who's the article on? Odegaard.
Mr. Odegaard, the man himself.
So head over to Kristan's Twitter, at @Heneage. Head over there and you will be able to read that article and you can find out more about Kristan as well. Kristan, thanks so much for chatting with me, mate. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me, mate.
Good man. We'll see you soon.